So you might be in this position right now. You might have this old home that you're considering renovating, but you're also considering tearing down and building. These three things are something you really need to consider. Are you ultimately going to renovate this home and get 100% what you want out of it? What's up, guys? It is episode 19 of Coffee Break, and this week we're going to talk about the 3 reasons why you should build instead of renovate. The first, I want to dig right into cost. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean I don't necessarily mean that it's more expensive to renovate than it is to build, but my good friend John Horahan, my co-host of the Modern Craftsman Podcast, always says renovating is like building a house with a house in the way. And to elaborate on that, that's exactly what you're doing. You're essentially renovating this house with an existing structure in place. And when you do a full home renovation, we're typically gutting that thing down to the studs. And oftentimes we kind of get to that point, we sweep up and then realize, you know what, the subfloor is in pretty poor condition. Let's start peeling that back. You know what, some of the structural framing actually doesn't meet code, and we've altered enough of this home that we need to bring everything up to code. It's one of those snowballing effects where, we oftentimes have that consideration of, should we just rip the house down? Is it really worth saving? And we'll get into that in another episode, but let's talk about specifically, why it doesn't make sense. And that cost that goes into really delicately demolishing something and taking it apart piece by piece really plays a contributing factor to the overall cost of the demolition portion, which would be the full gut, which we refer to as, like I said, stripping it down to the studs. There's a lot of kind of handwork there that leads to a very labor-intensive and cost-intensive process. You're also dealing with the utilities. Bringing things up to code. Not really having so many unforeseen conditions where it's we might go into it thinking that the plumbing is going to be in good shape because it was built maybe 10, 15 years ago, and we open up the wall and, oh my gosh, like it's not vented correctly. It's not going to meet code. Or electrical code changes so much where, every time we renovate, we're having to bring it up to a new code, and something else is always triggering, additional work. And we do our best to communicate that up front and make sure that we're considering that as an allowance going into the project. But there's always these unforeseen conditions. That's, why anytime we get into a renovation project, we're going to have a bigger contingency in there, just because we can't see inside the wall, and we can't, we don't want to over assume and then price ourselves into the atmosphere, but, at least come to the table, communicate our expectations and what we're expecting with the project. But it's all of those things that really lead to a more expensive endeavor, where if we were to build a house, we're kind of starting with ground zero and we're building something brand new, and it's, we're controlling so much of it. The unforeseen is really, from topsoil down, and depending on the soil conditions, it might be pretty straightforward, where a renovation, you're dealing with the entirety of the home. You're stripping layers back and realizing that there's multiple layers of drywall, there's multiple layers of wood flooring, there's multiple layers of siding. I can't tell you how many times that we strip siding off a house only to find 4 more layers below it, and that's you can do some due diligence there and peel maybe a layer off and understand what that is, but it all adds to additional work, where if you were to just crunch that house up, it's really just one machine. You're demoing it down to a pile of rubble and you're getting it out of there and you're starting over. So cost, for what you get out of it, that would be one reason you would build instead of renovate. The second would be, number 2 would be freedom. And what I mean by freedom is that, again, you're not building a house with a house in the way, you're building a house. You're strictly building something brand new. You get to design exactly what you want, and you don't have constraints. Yes, there are extensive remodels, and there's reasons to leave old homes for, there's a list of reasons, and we'll get to that in a future episode. But, specifically, if you would have had the choice and there was nothing holding you to renovating versus building, choosing to build gives you the freedom of building exactly what you want to your standard, the size of the home, the ceiling heights, maybe the position that is on the lot, how the sun shines into some of these windows because it's not positioned correctly. There's just entirely more freedom when you're building something from scratch. getting into renovating, you take it all the way down to the studs, and you're basically you're trying to improve everything incrementally, which I mean can be done. But let's go into, and let's go into number 3 here, the performance, which dovetails really well with freedom, the performance of a new home versus an old home. An old home, absolutely, we've done it. We've taken 1930s colonial and brought it down to a 1 ACH, air changes per hour, really tight house. We wanted it to perform. There was other reasons why we chose to renovate instead of knocking this house down, and we were able to get that performance up. But you are essentially dealing with an envelope on this house that was built in the 1930s. 1x8 sheathing on the house or on the roof. So very leaky building. If you're building a brand new home, you're able to incrementally add these details throughout the project to make sure that your home is completely airtight. And, ultimately you're designing it to perform really, really well. So you're not leaking heat or cooled air. You're controlling that climate within the house by taking those incremental steps. You're not building a house and then trying to seal up the holes. You're building the house with the consideration that I don't want to put holes in here, or you're using acoustical sealant under your plates because you want to make sure that is filling any potential air leakage spot. You don't have that opportunity with renovating as easily, and something that's easy is going to cost less money because it's less labor intensive. It just takes less work to really achieve that. So we talked about cost from renovating. It really dovetails into the freedom as well as the performance of the home. So cost, freedom, and performance are the 3 reasons why you would build over renovate. And really just having to consider, everything aside, there's so many reasons why you would renovate instead of build new. So you might be in this position right now. You might have this old home that you're considering renovating, but you're also considering tearing down and building. And those, these 3 things are something you really need to consider. Are you ultimately going to renovate this home and get 100% what you want out of it? Or are you trying to renovate it because you feel maybe bad for, ripping something that is so, might work for someone else? There's a lot of options there. Maybe you sell that and you buy a piece of land, you build something new elsewhere. Or maybe you consider, why don't we take a more methodical approach with, crunching this thing up, salvage as much of the material, donate a lot of these goods. There's so many opportunities to, donate this stuff. We oftentimes do it in our renovations because we have great appliances. Donate it to Habitat for Humanity, or there's these bargain companies that oftentimes give you a tax break on it. But you have to consider these 3 things when you're weighing out whether or not to tear down or build new, because ultimately, if you are letting one of those things control, let's say you decide I want to renovate. Going back to what I just said, are you actually going to get the house that you want? Is it going to be positioned on the lot to let that sunlight come in, into the breakfast area in the morning? Or are you willing to compromise and, ultimately live with something that might not be 100%? I think that's something that people get tripped up on a lot, is I'm not sure if I should rip down or build new. And the reason why you would renovate over build is something that you have to answer yourself. And ultimately, if you're not going to get what you want out of it, I truly believe that you'll end up renovating it, and maybe it's subconsciously, but you'll end up selling the house because it's just not what you wanted. You're going to go through a massive renovation. You're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's going to be all of this work that you're going to end up with a product that might be 70% of the way there, where if you can start fresh and there's nothing controlling you from ripping it down, you have a totally different mindset and you're able to control that all the way through, and you end up with a product that you truly, truly love. It's a long-term relationship. This is many months, possibly many years to achieve this. It's one of the biggest things that you'll invest in. And if you scale back because of an immediate decision that's right in front of you and not think of the long term, like I said, not consider the fact that, is this everything that you wanted? If you're not considering those things and you're focused on right now, I don't want to rip this house down because it is a beautiful house in the neighborhood. Well, you're not building it for the neighborhood. Let's build something brand new that fits with the neighborhood, that's beautiful for the neighborhood, but also has all the creature comforts and performance that you need out of a new home that will ultimately allow you to live in that home for a long, long time. And those are the clients that we like to work with. Those are the clients that builders like to work with, is people that want to build their forever home, or at least with a forever mentality. If you guys have questions, make sure you drop them in the comments below. We'll see you next week on Coffee Break.